I was just there in Congress. I just followed Fauci. I didn't say that I didn't know or I couldn't recall a single time. I gave an answer every time to the best of my ability, and I cited the data. I actually challenged the committee, and I said, listen, I've cited all this information. I had dozens and dozens of citations, usually the first authors, so you can locate it in the literature. And the panel conceded that Fauci didn't cite a single paper. He was just evasive all the way through. I can tell you, I've been an expert witness in a lot of high-profile cases in district court as well as federal court in the United States. And I can tell you, testimony like Fauci gave is the testimony of a guilty man. And the two crimes, if you will, that I think he's very much connected to are fraud. I think he's defrauded the United States on the origins of SARS-CoV-2, on early treatments for COVID-19, and on the COVID-19 vaccine.
Dr. Peter McCullough on the show. Doctor, that one goes out to you because you are strong and courageous, my friend, standing up for the people and their freedom.
Amen. Well, thanks for having me on the program. It's time to talk truth in 2024. Boy, do I have a lot of updates.
Wherever you want to start, the floor is yours.
Last week, Anthony Fauci, former White House coronavirus director and lead advisor, former National Institutes of Allergy and Immunology Infectious Disease branch, was in Washington for 2 7-hour sessions on testimony before the House COVID Select Committee. And I have to tell you, it was softball after softball. It was just easy theater for Fauci. I was so disappointed in this committee. We can't get them to ask some hard questions, but this is how we piece it together now. There's a news out today that Dr. Zheng Li, the bat lady from Wuhan, she was actually in Washington in 2017 and met with Fauci. This is all going to come out, whether the House committee gets it out of Fauci or not. So this is how I put it together. Between 2012 and 2015, Fauci, who directed the NIH branch at the time, worked with Dr. Ralph Baric at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Dr. Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance, and Dr. Zheng Li in Wuhan Institute of Virology. They created SARS-CoV-2. And Baric published this, first author is Vineet Menachery, in Nature Medicine and Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. At that time, they called it a SARS-like Wuhan Institute of Virology virus. It's the prototype for SARS-CoV-2. And I think they never, anticipated that this would get out of the lab. I do think it was accidentally leaked from the lab. And then once it came out of the lab, Fauci scrambled like crazy with Francis Collins, the director of the NIH, Jeremy Farrar at the Wellcome Trust, Christian Anderson at Scripps, Edwin Holmes from University of Sydney, and a whole group of doctors. They conspired to cover up the origins of SARS-CoV-2. And actually, Christian Anderson, and they all voiced it internally in the emails and messages. They knew it came out of the lab. They knew it was Baric's virus. Christian Anderson published in April of 2020 a paper in Nature Medicine stating the natural origins of SARS-CoV-2. It was intentionally misleading the academic community. This went on. There were 12 fraudulent papers. So Fauci really is part of the creation of SARS-CoV-2. He's clearly part of the cover-up. And that what's really been, I think, the most distressing thing is that the only answer governments ever really offered to their population was mass vaccination. And that brings me in. I was the lead witness testifying in a historic U.S. panel in the House of Representatives on Friday, January 12th.
Yeah, I saw that. Go ahead, Allan.
How did you feel that went? I watched a little bit about it, and it seemed that what was coming across was what we've discussed throughout the last 2.5 years. And do you think there's going to be anything coming out of that?
Well, to set the stage, we are in the Rayburn building, which is the main building for the U.S. House of Representatives. we were in one of the conference rooms similar to where Fauci was. Our panel was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a representative from Georgia, who I knew initially. In fact, I went on the same filming time of Tucker Carlson as she did, so I met her in the green room, and she had just taken the position. She's really matured over time. I was very impressed with Greene. She knew the issue. She was well prepared. Representative Warren Davidson from Ohio, who had particular concerns about our military, our soldiers harmed with the vaccines, and Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona. Now, I do sit on a standing bicameral committee for both the House and the Senate in Arizona, advising them. So, I knew of Biggs there, and they were joined by Senator Ron Johnson, who represented the Senate. And so each one of the witnesses, myself and Dr. Kirk Milhone, also a military officer, an MD, PhD, pediatric cardiologist. We were the three doctors testifying. So we each had opening statements regarding the state of knowledge regarding the vaccines, and then we just took a round robin of questions. And our lawmakers need to be able to ask doctors questions and have us field them, give answers. This was all very highly visible in the media. There were reporters in the room, and I think overall we got our mission accomplished. We answered the questions, and I think we informed America and the world what's going on.
Dr. Milhone was asking questions that I thought was very interesting, or he was making statements about how doctors have never before been told what to do, and if they don't do it, they're gone.
It's true. He was really focusing on the ethical aspects there. How are doctors going to possibly, reverse course and admit they're wrong? We pointed out through the testimony, there's 4 major areas of proven damage from the vaccines: cardiovascular, including myocarditis, acceleration of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, cardiac arrest, neurologic, both ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke, Guillain-Barré syndrome, small fiber neuropathy, seizures, now all well proven to be due to the vaccines. The third area is blood clots. Taylor Greene really focused on this. Blood clots, arterial, venous, large blood clots that, much larger, more dangerous than we've ever seen before. And we cited the literature. The fourth area is immunologic. We know the vaccines force the body to express the spike protein, then the body attacks its own cells. This is published, well understood. There are vaccine immunologic syndromes that are published in the peer-reviewed literature. Recently, media personality Megyn Kelly came out and said she had an autoimmune problem. So those 4 major areas, there's over 3,400 peer-reviewed papers in the medical literature. I've personally myself published over 70 contributing papers. The evidence base here is very strong. The second half of the hearing was really focused on this 5th emerging area, and that is, could the vaccines cause cancer?
And that's like a cliffhanger. The answer?
Well, I pointed out that the messenger RNA and the adenoviral DNA vaccines, so that's Pfizer, Moderna, Janssen, and AstraZeneca, they are, from a regulatory perspective, considered genetic products or gene transfer technology products. And being genetic products, the US FDA has a regulatory window of concern, meaning that, could something be due to the vaccine, of 5 years. And I think all the panel members were like, what? Isn't this over with? And I said, no. I said, we have 5 years of concern. I am seeing problems emerge even 2 years after the primary series in 2021. And I cited a paper here, Corri, published by Anguis and Bastila. This is a very important paper. It's called the multi-hit hypothesis of COVID-19 vaccination. And it goes back to a seminal paper by Sutherland and Baylor in 1984, who said, listen, if something causes cancer, it can't be just via one mechanism. It's probably multiple different ways that a single exposure could actually cause cancer. And with COVID-19 vaccines, the Chinese have published that the genetic vaccines, particularly messenger RNA, they do impair DNA repair. So we have our own repair capabilities. They're impaired. A paper from University of Pittsburgh, Singh and Singh, published that the spike protein produced from the vaccine, the S2 segment, which you get from the vaccine and not the infection, that impairs tumor suppressor systems P53 and BRCA. Those are our natural governor systems that help keep nascent cancer cells from taking over. We know if there's genetic deficiencies in P53 and BRCA, that those people are prone to cancer. So that'd be called like a BRCA positive woman, means, wow, she's at risk for breast cancer or a uterine or ovarian cancer. And then the third mechanism pointed out by Angus and Bustillo is this recent discovery. You've probably seen this in the press of DNA process-related impurities in Pfizer and Moderna. And this takes some explanation. I did explain this for the committee, but these impurities that so far at least 4 different investigators have found, the vials of vaccine are not made available to researchers so we can study them. So researchers have had to get them through various means. But they were surprised to find, in addition to messenger RNA, little pieces of DNA. This is important. What we've learned is both Pfizer and Moderna switched to using E. coli as the main way of producing the messenger RNA. They put a little circle of DNA inside the E. coli bacteria, and then that little circle called the plasmid multiplies as the E. coli multiply. And in order to figure out which E. coli actually have the gene for Pfizer Moderna, that circular plasmid has an antibiotic resistance gene. And then it has 3 critical segments called the SV40 or simian virus 40, promoter, enhancer, and inhibitor. So these actually really, an origin of insertion, that these really ramp up the circular plasmid DNA multiplication. So again, SV40, enhancer, promoter, and origin of insertion. The reason why this is so concerning is as these fragments come off and go into the vials of Pfizer Moderna, particularly the SV40 fragments, they're known proto-oncogene activators. They actually turn on cancers. That's proven. And so this is so concerning that Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo, you probably saw this last week, came out with a statement saying, listen, pull them off the market. They've got these impurities. DNA is rapidly taken up into human cells. We're going to be in trouble.
Well, I know you guys have been on the record for quite a while now, right, of pulling them off the market, and they're not being pulled off the market. What do you feel the reason is why they're not pulling off the market when the evidence is just, you're drowning in evidence, right?
Yeah, we finally saw the US FDA show its colors, in the last few weeks. The US FDA, just like your Canadian authorities, they should be objective, right? So they're weighing risks and benefits. They should never go out and advertise a product. Our FDA now is actually out there unabashedly promoting vaccination. So recently, FDA Commissioner Robert Califf, somebody who I know is a cardiologist formerly at Duke, he was actually tweeting that the COVID vaccines reduce long COVID. I mean, that's a false promotion. He's also, in a paper in JAMA recently, implied that the COVID vaccines reduce the risk of death. That's a false promotion. There are no prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials that ever showed that the vaccines reduced long COVID or reduced transmission or reduced hospitalization and death. Those putative benefits are not even in the consent form. So our FDA is actually now advertising the vaccines like a drug company. So the word I used in the congressional testimony, and this is in the congressional record, is that the FDA has gone rogue. So the agency that would have pulled the vaccines off the market now is not going to. They're actually part of the pharmaceutical industry here. So it's going to take a congressional call. I've pointed out that U.S. Congress has 5 committees that have some degree of oversight over the FDA. None of them are particularly strong connections, but we need a formal call. All three experts called for the vaccines to be removed from the market. This was the first call, by the way, in the U.S. House of Representatives has ever occurred like that. I made the same call when I concluded the session in December of 2022 in the U.S. Senate. I've made similar calls, by the way, in the European Parliament, the UK Parliament, as well as multiple state senates. And I also summarized on Twitter, if you want to follow somebody who's keeping track of this in an orderly and accurate manner, Dr. Mary Telly Bowden, an ENT physician in Houston, puts this out on her daily tweet. We were up to over 70 candidates, over 60 lawmakers, and then one U.S. Surgeon General calling for removal of the vaccines. And these numbers will continue to grow. So many candidates now are being asked, what's your stance on the vaccines? This is going to ultimately, I think, become a major criteria for a candidate to come clean on this. Having multiple calls to have these off the market all over the world, I think, is really a signal to the public that they're not safe for human use.
Yeah.
You had mentioned.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Corey.
Well,
sorry.
you've sat with Senator Ron Johnson quite often over the last few years. I mean, a lot. So kudos to him for sitting there for hours and hours and hours of testimony over the years. Where's he at with everything he's seen and heard? Where is Senator Ron Johnson at?
Ron Johnson has sent over 60 letters of concern to regulatory agencies. He's been a staunch advocate for early treatment, of clearly having doctors freely express their concerns over vaccine safety. Like myself, Johnson's been appalled with the degree of social media and medical censorship. In a recent paper on my Substack by Meg Haney and colleagues, they actually expose what Twitter was doing. Before Elon Musk acquired Twitter, Twitter was actually using hashtags for any type of COVID-19 vaccine side effect and then killing those tweets to, in a sense, only present the vaccines in their best light. So people could not go on social media and get a fair review. I was at a Freedom Conference a few months ago, and a Canadian doctor got up on stage and opened up Google, and he typed in COVID-19 vaccine side effects in the Google search engine. And the first thing that comes up is the vaccines are safe and effective. And the next thing comes up, safe and effective, whatever. And you can tell these searches are rigged. They're rigged to fool the consumer into thinking it's safe and effective. And I think now people are seeing right through this.
Yep.
We had a lady friend who is in her 90s, and she was in the hospital with the flu, and the sons were watching with her 24/7, and one of the sons has been a nurse for years and years and years, and he wrote a memo to his other siblings saying, that if the nurses are going to try to give mom remdesivir, please stop them. And of course, this happened in one of the shifts, and of course, one of the sons stopped them, and that kind of thing. And then I asked the question, why are they still giving this when they know that, of the causes? And he tells me they don't know, that they've been trained not to think critically, but they've been trained just to, whatever the paper says, whatever the order is given, you just do it. Is that your take on what's happening with our medical people in the medical field?
It's true. They just defer to authority of kind of the most proximal authority point of reference. So it may be their hospital protocol, or it may be, a Health Canada or a Canadian authority protocol. But, people should look at this and say, listen, the WHO, November of 2020, basically said, listen, remdesivir should not be used in COVID patients in the hospital because it doesn't work. And in some people, it causes kidney damage and liver damage. And then in critical patients, that can be in the causal pathway to death. And then the WHO Solidarity Group in May of 2022 revisited all the data, the additional trials, and they concluded they were right originally in November of 2020 to not, use remdesivir. It should actually be pulled off the hospital formulary shelves. It simply doesn't work, and for some people, it's dangerous. So even when the various regulatory authorities disagree, no one looks at the disagreement and would look to a body of concern. There's a phrase that's been used. There's actually a book on this now called COVID and the Canary, or Canary in the Coal Mine. If you have 3 or 4 different sources that say something's okay, and one source that says I'm concerned about safety, you always look to the one point of reference that's concerned about safety.
Yeah.
And so this is the type of situation that we have with COVID. Early on, you guys know you're talking to the only public figure in writing who questioned the COVID-19 vaccines. I published an op-ed in The Hill, which is widely read by the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the title of the op-ed, this is before the vaccines came out, is The Great Gamble of These Vaccines. And boy, was I right. So many public figures out there took these vaccines. And I think this is a big problem, by the way, with all the doctors and nurses and senators and congressmen taking the vaccines. They actually really don't want to know any news about bad side effects emerging, because they don't want to psychologically reckon with the fact that it's in their body.
Yeah. Well, I know Canadians want to know, and so I want to ask you this on that 5-year, when you're saying that the vaccines cause damage for, into 5 years. Would you say the clock on that 5-year starts every time you get a shot? So like if you just got one, like 6 months ago, the 5-year clock starts?
Yeah, that's when the clock starts, from the last shot.
Wow. We did a national citizens inquiry, and one of the scientists that came out and said that worldwide, approximately, and he felt there was a conservative figure, that 17 million people have been killed because of the vaccine shot. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, let's just take the United States. We'll take some hard numbers. As of November 3rd, 2023, our CDC had the death rate of Americans reported to the CDC by doctors who think the vaccine caused the death at over 18,000. And the underreporting factor, meaning if we don't have the vaccine card and we don't have all the details, we can't report it. So all these people who die and we can't find the vaccine card, they don't get reported. The underreporting factor in FDA testimony is at 30, conservatively. That means the United States were over 550,000 Americans who died after the vaccine. Of the 18,000 the CDC has in their database, 1,150 die right in the vaccine center or a few hours later. So it's very clear. It's just they take the vaccine and they die. So those are the U.S. data. The U.S. is about 4% of the world's population. Now this analysis you cite by Dennis Rancourt out of Montreal indicates, based on ecological calculations, we could be at 17 million people worldwide who have died of the COVID-19 vaccines. That would be cohesive from all the sources of data that exist. That would be enough to have all-cause mortality rise in almost every nation, which it is, and should be a global cause of concern. I think the real head-scratcher is why, in over 100 countries, why is not a single country removed these vaccines from the market?
Yeah.
Agreed. Last question. You think Anthony Fauci's going to see? Are we gonna really get down to the Anthony Fauci thing? Because I agree with you. Bunch of softballs. He was saying, I don't even know about the 6 feet, distancing, where that came from. We have clips and clips and clips. Not only just clips of what the man said, but we saw him change and how he changed what he said. Will we ever get justice on that man?
Well, I can tell you, I was just there in Congress. I just followed Fauci. I didn't say that I didn't know or I couldn't recall a single time. I gave an answer every time to the best of my ability, and I cited the data. I actually challenged the committee And I said, listen, I've cited all this information. I had dozens and dozens of citations, usually the first author, so you can locate it in the literature. And the panel conceded that Fauci didn't cite a single paper. He was just evasive all the way through. I can tell you, I've been an expert witness in a lot of high-profile cases in district court as well as federal court in the United States. And I can tell you, testimony like Fauci gave is the testimony of a guilty man. And the two crimes, if you will, that I think he's very much connected to are fraud. I think he's defrauded the United States on the origins of SARS-CoV-2, on early treatments for COVID-19, and on the COVID-19 vaccines. And, I can tell you Attorney General Ken Paxton in our state agrees. He believes, as an extension of this, that Pfizer has defrauded the state in terms of safety and efficacy of the vaccines. And there's a lawsuit based on the long arm of Texas law and what's called the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. So I think fraud is up there for Fauci. And the second actually is mass negligent homicide, that people died who didn't need to die. Now, breaking news today, as senior author, I have a paper out in the peer-reviewed literature in a very high-profile journal, the European Society of Cardiology. And this paper clearly indicates by autopsy that COVID-19 vaccination myocarditis is fatal. It's now conclusive. It's fatal. And even in the abstract, we say, listen, all these people who are passing away that look perfectly healthy and they're young, if they've taken the vaccine, it is the vaccine until proven otherwise. Yeah. This is a very, very important paper. European Society of Cardiology, heart failure. Hulscher is the first author from University of Michigan. I'm the senior author. So mass negligent homicide. And Fauci's right there. We know Senator Rand Paul has a book out on Fauci. We know presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy has a book out on Fauci. When you're somebody who's going to Washington on Capitol Hill like I am, and there are books out about one's complicity in essentially crimes against humanity. This is unprecedented, you guys.
And a movie.
Yeah, and a movie. Let me tell you something else unprecedented before I leave. Do you know Carrico and Wiseman just received the Nobel Prize for pseudo-uridination of messenger RNA, essentially making Pfizer and Moderna indestructible, to last in the body potentially forever. This Nobel Prize almost certainly is for an invention that's harmed humanity. Just like Albert Nobel himself and Haber and Monitz, there have been these inventions that won the Nobel Prize, but they've caused great harm to humanity. But this one was so immediately recognized. Do you know there were candlelight vigils protesting this Nobel Prize all across Scandinavia in the months after the announcement? This is unprecedented that people recognize what a horrible development this is for humanity. And this is all messenger RNA right now. Not only are we calling for the COVID-19 vaccines to be pulled off the market, but that there's a moratorium on any further development of messenger RNA vaccines. That's how dangerous they are.